Hey everyone, this is James Moffitt coming to you live from Duck Ditch, USA. I have been thinking a lot about the YouTube 30-day challenge. I listened to or read, actually, I think I read the story on Medium about a group of 60 some odd year old ladies who started a 30-day challenge for the YouTube channels. And I thought about how daunting that seems to be on the surface. Episodes, 30 episodes. And then I thought, well, this is not a podcast episode, and I am not actually creating content because guess what? The content's already in here. It's 64 years of life lived and life earned, right? All this gray hair. Uh, it didn't get there overnight. It got there by living life, being married for 35 years, having 4 children. So, having said that, I really want this to be unscripted for the most part. I want it to be, as I said, unscripted and just whatever's coming to me off the top of my head. I'm going to talk about my day, talk about my family, talk about my marriage, talk about my kids within reason, right? I'm not going to share any deep, dark secrets, but just your typical run of the mill, everyday life stuff, right? And it'll be things that we all have these stories, our life stories, right? And my podcast podcaster host type is a storyteller. So I tell stories, and I like telling stories. I have lots of stories. I have more stories than I can think about. But even with all of that said, and while I don't want this to come across as some kind of polished content, I do want it to be intentional, right? So I used ChatGPT or AI today to come up with 30 topics to discuss. And it gave me some things to think about, right? So I may not use all of them, but I want to use the topics or the suggestion for topics as a springboard for uh, the content for each day for my YouTube channel, right? So having said that, I was talking to a coworker today about a childhood memory, and I'm not really sure where it came from or why. We were talking about something, who knows. So I thought about it, and I shared it with him, and I'll share it with you. I was born in 1961, and my sister and I were adopted from a German orphanage in Aschaffenburg, Germany. I think I've already shared that in a previous episode. So I won't go into all of that again, but I will say that my adoptive father was stationed in Frankfurt, Germany, Army base there. And when his tour of duty there ended, I guess, he brought my adoptive mother and my sister and I back to the US of A. And he, I think, was stationed in Leesville, Louisiana. And my sister and I I want to say we were like 6, 7, or 8 years old. And what were some of my childhood memories from back then? One of the childhood memories I have is that I remember the police cars were canary yellow, just like the yellow cab here in Charleston, South Carolina, Houston, Texas. All the different major cities have a yellow cab. Well, they probably don't have them as much anymore because of rideshare programs like Lyft and Uber. I think Lyft and Uber has kind of, for the most part, they've kind of replaced cab companies. Cab companies are still in business and still in operation. Here in Charleston, I think the cab companies are only in operation during business hours, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And I know this because not too long ago, I was working a security job at Walmart, and somebody approached me and said that they needed to get a ride. and they didn't have a cell phone. They didn't have the Lyft app or the Uber app on their phone. Therefore, they couldn't order a ride in that manner. So I thought, hey, let's call the cab company. Let's call Yellow Cab. And there's several other companies in Charleston, North Charleston, Goose Creek area. I don't know what the names of them are. The one I'm familiar with is Yellow Cab. So I called Yellow Cab, and what did Yellow Cab tell me? Well, this was like at 9 o'clock at night, and I got the answering service, and they were like, "Yeah, we're not picking up rides right now." And I was like, "What do you mean? It's a cab company, right?" And they were like, "Yeah, but we're only in operation during regular business hours and daylight, and so we're not available for this purpose." And I was like, "Well, that's news to me." So I had to tell the person that was looking for a way home that they were out of luck as far as the cab company was concerned. And I think it was late enough at night that CARTA, our public transit bus system here in Charleston, was not running either. I don't know how late CARTA runs. I want to say 10 o'clock is probably the cutoff time, and that's depending on where on the route you're at as to whether or not you can catch the last bus. That person was out of luck, and I couldn't help them. No idea how they got home. Times people will wait until Walmart closes at 10 minutes to 11, 10:50. They keep people from coming in the store at about 10 minutes to 11 and work on getting all the people that are already in the store out, which just pisses people off to no end because people show up at 5 minutes to 11 and go, "Hey, your advertising stores, your hours of operation are from 6 a.m. until 11 p.m." And they just don't understand that Walmart management won't let them come into the store at 5 minutes to 11. And I think that's largely because Walmart employees want to go home, right? I get that. So I guess mental note is if you need something from Walmart, get there 30 minutes before closing so you can get in, get your stuff, and get out, right? Don't wait until 10 minutes until 11 to decide to hop in the car and run to Walmart because that ain't going to work. I guess it'll happen to you one time and you'll figure that out. Whether you get emotional about it or not is, besides the point. But anyway, so we're talking about childhood memories. And so, yes, Leesville, Louisiana, Fort Polk, where my dad was the last place he was stationed as a drill sergeant in the Army. And the police cars were canary yellow. That's how I got off onto the rabbit holes of talking about Yellow Cab, right? So getting back to the original thought, canary yellow police cars. And I think they had I think back in, I think this was like in the late 60s, 68, 69, something like that. I think they had the big red bubblegum machines on top. You remember those? Most of you are probably, well, some of you might be baby boomers and you may remember that. But once upon a time, police cars had big red bubblegum machines. And we call them big bubblegum machines because, well, they were big, giant, revolving lights, red lights. And they sat on top, right in the middle of the roof of the car, and they just went round and round. And we didn't have the strobe like the LED lights the police cars have on them now. But anyway, it was canary yellow car, police car with bubblegum machine on top. For some reason, that sticks out in my memory. And I remember how, as a child, I used to hate to uh, rake up pine needles. In the house that we lived in, I guess we rented it, but we had a huge yard, nothing but pine trees in Leesville, Louisiana. And my gosh, my outside chore as a boy was to rake up pine needles. And I raked up pine needles until my hands were bloody almost. Well, they weren't bloody, but I'm sure I got lots of calluses from that rake. But I also remember as a boy, my I had friends across the street and on either side, and we would play cops and robbers. And we would do that when I was supposed to be raking pine needles, right? we had our little gun belts and our little cap guns and our cowboy hats and boots and what have you, and we would use big piles of pine needles and stand behind pine trees and chase each other around and shoot at each other, having make believe cops and robber games or whatever. So anyway, yeah, that was fun. I remember that as a kid. I also remember my dad got me, I think this was 1968. He had a little black and white TV set in the living room. And he got me hooked on the Dallas Cowboys football. Dallas Cowboys football back in the era of Tom Landry and Roger Staubach and Bob Lilly and all of those old football stars for the Dallas Cowboys way back when. I've been watching them ever since. And the Dallas Cowboys are not the team they were in the 80s, back when they won their Super Bowls. And then I believe they have 5 Super Bowl rings, right along with New England Patriots and the Pittsburgh Steelers and a couple of other teams in the NFL that have, 4 or 5 Super Bowl rings. Dallas hadn't seen one in a long time. They've been in the playoff a couple of times, but they have not done very well in the last couple of decades. And I remember, and this is a childhood memory, I remember how when Tom Landry retired, my dad and I agreed on the fact that that was the end of the Dallas Cowboy era, because Tom Landry was a old school coach like Vince Lombardi and others. And uh, they were classy. They were men of integrity. They were classy. They believed in smash mouth football, right? And football was, well, it was still a sport, but I think it was a hard fought sport back then. I seem to think that it's not the helmet technology and the pads and all the technological advancements that have increased or been introduced into the NFL hadn't even been born yet, hadn't even been created yet. And so it just if you won the football game, you won it because you played hard, you hit hard, and you used your talents and skills to win the game. And that's not to say that they don't do that now. I'm just thinking that looking back at the football from the late 60s, 70s, and 80s, it seems like that was the NFL of old. That was the National Football League of old. And I could be wrong about that, but that's just a childhood memory, right? So one of the other things I remember is my dad retired from the Army, I think in 69 or 70, and he moved our family back to Quinlan, Texas, which is in northeast Texas, which is between Terrell, Texas and Greenville, Texas. And Greenville, Texas is the geographical hub of northeast Texas. Anyway, we moved into a rental house, and next door to that rental house, I guess there was some property that was available, and my parents bought 1.5 lots. I don't even know how much that is, whatever 1.5 lots equates to. They bought 1.5 lots and built a brick home on that property, put a fence around it, and 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath house. And they bought it for $30,000. Well, that's nothing compared to today. Now 250,000 or 300,000 or 400,000 or half a million. Homes are going for those amounts of money. And shoot, some of our vehicles are 30,000 and beyond, right? So the house that my parents bought, now we're driving cars that cost as much as their house did, which is kind of crazy. Sorry, my nose itches. I don't know why. I'm on camera and I'm scratching my nose like I got fleas or something. And I don't, trust me. But anyhow, yeah, they had a 30-year note on that house and they paid it off in 15 years, which means that they they did a wonderful job of paying that house off, and they paid a lot less interest on that loan than they would have had they paid it off like a 30-year mortgage. So anyway, believe it or not, even at that new home that my parents bought that we lived in, I had outside chores. My sister had inside chores. And my outside chores were watering the trees, watering the dogs, taking out the trash, washing the cars, all of the above. And raking leaves, raking pine needles. I think there was more. I think they had oak trees and different types of trees in the yard. I don't think they had any pine trees in the yard, not in Quinlan, Texas. But anyway, I remember I was outside doing some kind of outside chore. I don't know what it was. And my dad he had a yellow riding mower. It was a Murray, Murray mower. And he was outside mowing the grass. I guess I was too young at that point to push a push mower or whatever. So he drove up to me and turned the mower off and looked at me. And he said, "You want to hear something?" I'm like, I wasn't going to say no. And I said, "Sure. Tell me something funny." And he says, "I've got a rule with your mother that says that she could grow anything in this yard she wants to grow as long as I can run over it with a lawnmower." Oh, he thought that was so funny. And I thought it was funny too, because not not too long before that little episode where he told me about his rule with my mother, I had been asked, I guess I had a chore of weeding the flower bed in front of the house, right? So I weeded the flower bed in front of the house. I pulled all the flowers up, all the plants. There were more flowers and plants in that flower bed than there was weeds. St. Augustine grass is really hard. Once it gets into the soil, it roots itself pretty decent. And so I pulled everything up, and my mother came outside and saw that, and she went off on me. She was livid. She was upset. She was as mad as a wet hen. I don't know if you've ever seen a wet hen. Chickens and hens and roosters, they do not like water. That is not their favorite sport. Trust me. Anyway, yeah, that was in the context of my dad's joke about your mother can grow anything she wants to in the yard as long as I can run over it with a lawnmower. That was pretty funny. That's one of the happy moments, happy memories I have of my dad. Let's see, what else do I want to talk about? Oh yes, CB radios. Let's fast forward into the 70s. My mom and dad were into CB radios. There were no cell phones. There weren't even bag phones at that point. The only phone you had was your landline, and that was a rotary phone. That was a uh, party line, right? You didn't have a standalone analog line that was yours only. You shared your analog party line with all your neighbors. So if you were really good at picking up that handset very slowly and taking your finger and mashing it down on the little plastic, whatever you call them, those little stoppers. When you picked up the phone, that activated the phone, right? And so you could push down those stoppers and you could sit there for hours listening to your neighbors gossip. Now, as a child, I didn't have access to the phone. I was not allowed to touch the phone. That was an adult's responsibility. At least before I became a teenager. But I remember the party line. And I remember there were no bag phones. There were no cell phones. There wasn't even any in our household. That is, there were no cordless phones. I don't know when cordless phones came into existence, but in our household, it was a hardwired phone. It was one of those big yellow or beige rotary phones, right? You had to put your finger in the hole, whatever number you wanted, and follow it all the way across, and then go do it again. You just listen to it make all those noises. And it was a party line. You had to wait until everybody was off the party line before you could make a phone call. And, so anyway, I remember that because CBs were a way to communicate. And my dad and all his cousins, or my aunts and uncles, they actually, and when you talk about that sort of thing, genealogy, come to find out they were my cousins and not my aunts or uncles. But they were older than me, and I was instructed to call them aunts and uncles. I didn't I didn't know any different. I didn't care. So their whole family were into CB radios. All the trucks and cars had CB radios in them with big antennas. And all four of us, mom, dad, sister, and me, we had CB handles. We had handles, right? And again, I was not allowed to talk on the CB radio until I was, older. Older. I got to talk on the CB radio when my parents were supervising me, I guess. But I remember that my dad, he was a TV man back then. He worked on TVs. Back when RCA and Zenith TVs had those round, they're about that tall and about that round, little gas tubes. They had gas tubes that plugged into the system board on the TVs. Of course, it had the glass. I don't even remember what it's called anymore. The picture that you looked at, picture tube. Yeah, it was called a picture tube. That's right. Anyway, because my dad was in electronics and he went to East Texas State University and got his degree in electronics or whatever it was. He was a math wizard, blah, blah, blah. Well, not only did he have a CB radio in the truck, he uh, he and I dug a hole by the corner of a lot of people had solid or hollow steel pipes that were run down the side of the house by the chimney, whatever, fireplace, chimney, or by the garage or what have you. They found a place to run a steel pipe into the ground up higher than the roof, and they put ground planes on them. And the ground plane was just literally an antenna straight up, and I think two or three aerials or antenna spines or whatever you want to call them. Part of the antenna was flat, right? So you had the piece straight up, and then you had two or three or four radio antennas that branched out on the bottom, and that was called a ground plane. Well, my dad was of the mindset that you either go big or go home. So he put a tower. We built, we dug a hole 4 foot by 4 foot by 4 foot. I don't know. I probably had the dimensions wrong, but it was a pretty deep hole, especially for this kid, right? I helped him do that, and he put rebar in the hole and put the tower in there and poured concrete. And this tower was 3-sided. It had 3 hollow steel poles going up. It was a triangle, and it had lattice work in between to give it some strength. I think that thing had 3 sections, and I don't know what the length of the sections were or the height or whatever, but I know it was way up there. And he had what was called beams, and the beams were set on top of another single pole with a rotor, and he had a controller by the base station in the house. He could change the direction of those beams whichever way he wanted to, north, east, south, or west, or whatever. He didn't have to go outside and or take channel lock pliers and move the ground plane from one side to the other or whatever. He could just hit that switch and it would just move it. And this is a childhood memory because I remember how much work it was to plant that tower. And it was no small task. And I remember I went back home at some point. It was probably 20 years later, and Quinlan, Texas had just exploded. The population had exploded like most little rural towns. And I remember that I went and was looking for my childhood home. I didn't have the address anymore. I didn't remember what the address was. Heck, I don't even remember the phone number. But I remember that when I was looking for the house, I knew I was going to find the right house, because if the TV and if the not the TV but the CB antenna tower was still in the ground, and sure enough, it was. The CB antenna was no longer on top of it. It might have had a TV antenna at that point, But anyway, yeah, I found the house because of that tower. It was still buried in the same place it was, back in 1970, 71, whenever it was. We moved into the house in 70, I think, 70 or 71. But yeah, that's another childhood memory I have of Quinlan, Texas. Me and my dad burying that stupid tower. And I think that tower could probably take a direct hit from a tornado and it wouldn't budge. It would take, I don't know, it might take an EF5 to bend that tower because, like I said, it's buried in concrete. Um, but yeah, CB radios in the 1970s. I remember how we'd be going down the road. And my mom and dad, they'd go to Carswell Air Force Base to get groceries because they were military and they went to the PX or the commissary. It was a commissary where they went to get groceries for a month. And Fort Worth was, oh, I don't know, a good 90 minutes away from our house in Quinlan, Texas. And so my sister and I would ride with our parents. And when they were in those commissary shopping for groceries, we would sit outside in the car back when you could legally leave your kids in the car in the summertime. And of course, they'd roll down the windows and we would watch the fighter jets take off at Carswell Air Force Base. I was 8, 9, 10 years old, and I just loved that. That was awesome. And the 8-year-old that's still living within the 64-year-old body still loves watching fighter jets take off and land to this day. All right, this is going a little bit longer than I had intended. So let's talk about let's talk about the fact that I think one of the dogs ate my wife's cell phone. And I say that because we can't find the stupid thing. And I think it was around between the 20th and the 29th. She lost her cell phone. I don't know if it fell out of her pocket when we were going to a store or what, but it's powered off, dead by now. Hasn't been charged. We've looked in the recliners. We looked under the recliners, under the tables in the living room. We've looked under the bed, the head of the bed. We've looked. We've looked everywhere. We've looked in. She's looked in her. She's looked in. She's looked everywhere. She looked in all her jackets and sweaters and tore the car up, moved everything in the car seats, looked under the seats. The phone is gone. And she lost her wallet not too long ago, this year, 2025, 6 months ago. I don't know. She'll listen to this, and I'm sure she'll leave a comment and say exactly what date and time it was that she lost her wallet. She lost her debit card, her social security card, everything, all the important things that you would have in your wallet. She lost it. She had to get another debit card, another social security card, and her phone wasn't in that particular wallet because it wasn't big enough to hold it. So anyway, we bought her a wallet on Amazon, and it holds all those personal items that I just mentioned. Plus, it's got a slot for her phone. So one of the things that my sweet wife, I've been trying to teach her this for the last 35 years, and the idea is that if you put an object in the same place all the time, when you go to look for it, you'll find it. Right? And she has yet to have understood that or grasped that fact. And I'll also admit to you that while I might be making fun of her inability to keep track of inanimate objects, I have more stories, and I have more things that she could tell about me versus me being able to tell about her. But this is my story time, and so I get to talk about her losing her phone. And I bought an AirTag. I bought an AirTag and I put it in that wallet so that if she keeps all her stuff together, including her cell phone, if she loses the wallet, I'll be able to track it with the AirTag. Those things are like $30. They're not cheap. Come to find out, the phone wasn't in the wallet when she lost it. It's gone. I'm thinking one of the dogs ate it, or they got it, they hid it somewhere, buried it in the yard. I don't know. Luckily, we've got insurance on it, and T-Mobile's gonna replace it. And I want to get a flipping AirTag, and I'm going to super glue it to the back of that phone or glue it or attach it somehow that'll be semi-permanent so that when she loses it again, I won't have to depend on that phone to have a charge and it be on so that we can dial that number and listen for it to ring wherever it's at. We thought it was in her classroom. She likes to leave it in her classroom at school. And her boss looked in her room today, even though school's closed. He went up there for I don't know what. And he looked for her cell phone. It wasn't in her sweater. It wasn't on her refrigerator. It wasn't on her desk. It's not there. It's gone. So we'll just get it replaced. And I'll get another AirTag from Amazon and make it to where I can track that silly thing, right? So I think I'm going to end that right here. I think this is a good place for me to put a pin in this daily conversation. Stories from a baby boomer. You like that? Is that do you think that's appropriate or relevant or does that make sense? If you're listening to this, if I haven't bored you to tears or if you haven't, you might have fallen asleep in your chair, if you're in a recliner. Baby boomers love recliners. And when you're in your 20s, you're like, "What? Why nobody needs a recliner? What's the big deal?" My dad had a recliner. But yeah, I love my recliner. I'm telling you, that thing is a gift from heaven. So I need a recliner, a cold drink, and my TV remotes. And I have 5 of them. That's a topic for another conversation, right? We'll talk about the 5 remotes sometime this week. But anyhow, thank you for listening to me. If you're on my YouTube channel, if you're one of those 91 subscribers that are listening to this, if you like it, leave a comment. If you're just a net citizen that just happened to stumble upon my meager, minor little YouTube channel, if you like this, if you want to hear me babble on some more about childhood memories and the state of affairs in America and politics, I'm not going to talk too much about politics. I might bring it up every once in a while, but if you like it, hit that subscribe button, leave me a comment and say, hey, I have the same memories or some of the same memories. Anyway, it's nice to, it's nice that people are listening, right? That's why we do this. I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this for you because I want you to be entertained. And maybe along the way, I might be able to even share something that you might learn something. That'd be crazy, huh? So anyway, this is Monday, December the 29th. 2 more days. It's going to be, well, the first is Thursday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Yeah, 3 days from now, it'll be January 1, 2026. Thursday is New Year's Day. So the last thing I remembered, it was April of 2025. And where the other 6 or 7, 8 months went to, I have no idea. So anyway, everybody have a good night, good day, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.